The chilling October air bit at Blake Morrison's rugged face as he emerged from the formidable embrace of his black F-150 Raptor. At 34, a silent authority clung to him, the kind born from dancing with death and walking away unscarred. In the gilded cage of Westbrook, his neighbors saw a thriving security consultant. But the true saga of his 12 years as a Navy SEAL, the reason his former brethren still whispered his name as the Phantom, remained shrouded in shadow. By the way, please like and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this. Before him, the two-story colonial edifice shimmered, a tangible testament to every hell he'd endured overseas, the American dream solidified in brick and mortar. He'd claimed it 3 years prior, a wedding gift to Candace, paid for with the hard-won spoils of private security contracts for Fortune 500 giants. The immaculately manicured lawn, the quintessential white picket fence, the glistening fleet of luxury vehicles in the driveway. From the outside, it was a tableau of absolute perfection. As Blake strode towards the front door, his phone vibrated, a lifeline to his younger brother, Tyler, whose text heralded their upcoming fishing excursion. Tyler, always the gentler soul, had chosen the quiet path of an educator over the brutal crucible of the military. At 28, he shaped young minds at Jefferson Elementary, content with a modest downtown apartment and a life unburdened by conflict. 5 years ago, a horrific car crash had stolen their parents, forging an unbreakable bond between the surviving brothers. "Honey, I'm home," Blake's voice echoed through the house, the metallic gleam of Candace's silver BMW in the garage a silent promise of her presence. She should be preparing dinner, he mused. They have reservations at Romano's tonight, their third wedding anniversary. Candace materialized from the kitchen, a vision of sculpted beauty. Her blonde hair fell in perfect cascades, her makeup flawlessly applied despite a day spent at home. At 31, she possessed a magnetic allure that turned heads, precisely the siren call that had drawn Blake to her at the corporate charity gala where their paths had intertwined. She had been an event coordinator then, a role she'd abandoned after their marriage, claiming a fervent desire to cultivate a family. "How was your day?" Her question, accompanied by a quick perfunctory kiss, felt more like a formality than a flicker of passion. "Wrapped up the Henderson Industries contract. Their executive protection detail is fully trained now." Blake's gaze sharpened, discerning the subtle tension etched around her eyes, a shadow that had grown increasingly familiar. "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" "Just tired. I've been planning the neighborhood barbecue for next month." She pivoted sharply, her words a carefully constructed deflection. "Derek Walsh stopped by earlier. He's offering to help with the setup." Derek Walsh, their neighbor, 3 houses down. A divorce attorney who'd moved in 6 months prior. Blake had encountered him at a handful of neighborhood gatherings, charming, successful, and recently divorced. Yet something about the man had always grated on Blake's nerves, an indefinable wrongness. "That's nice of him," Blake offered, his tone deliberately neutral. "What kind of help?" "Oh, tables, chairs, coordination." He knows a lot of vendors. Candace's voice possessed that artificial lightness, a tell that Blake's training had honed into an instinct for deceit. As they prepared for dinner, Blake watched his wife move about their bedroom, 3 years of marriage, and lately it felt as though he shared his life with a phantom. The passionate woman who once greeted him with unbridled enthusiasm had been replaced by a hollow echo, merely going through the motions. Their conversations had withered to a superficial exchange, their intimacy a fleeting memory. At Romano's, Candace remained tethered to her phone, claiming urgent work calls for the barbecue planning. Blake, however, observed the micro-expressions that betrayed her. The faint smile as she texted, the subtle angle of the phone away from his view, the quickened breath when certain messages arrived. "Candace," he finally interjected, his wineglass meeting the table with a soft thud. "Are we okay?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide with a fleeting panic before she reassembled her composure. "Of course we are. Why would you ask that?" "You seem distant lately, distracted." "I'm just stressed about the barbecue. It's a big responsibility." She reached across the table, her fingers closing over his in a practiced squeeze. "I love you, Blake." "Happy anniversary." But her hand was cold, her smile a brittle facade, and Blake's instincts, sharpened by years of combat and clandestine operations, screamed that something was terribly, fundamentally amiss. The piercing ring of Blake's phone tore through the 2 a.m. silence, jolting him upright. Combat reflexes, honed to a razor's edge, obliterated the last vestiges of sleep. Beside him, Candace stirred, but the tranquilizer she'd taken for stress-induced insomnia held her fast in its grip. "Blake?" Tyler's voice, strained and thick, barely recognizable, sliced through the quiet. "Tyler? What's wrong?" I'm in the ER at Mercy, General. They broke my jaw, Blake. I need you." Blake was out of bed, pulling on clothes before Tyler had even finished speaking. "I'm on my way. What happened?" "I'll explain when you get here." It's about Candace." The line went dead. Blake snatched his keys, scribbled a hurried note for Candace about a family emergency, and tore through the deserted streets, his mind reeling through a maelstrom of horrific possibilities. Tyler wasn't a fighter. He was a pacifist, a man who hadn't thrown a punch since elementary school. Mercy General's ER was a fluorescent-lit hell of antiseptic smells and muffled suffering. Blake found Tyler in room 7, his face a grotesque tapestry of bruises and medical tape. His jaw was wired shut, his left eye swollen, completely closed. "Jesus Christ," Blake whispered, pulling up a chair. "Who did this to you?" Tyler struggled to speak through his wired jaw, the words slurred but imbued with desperate urgency. "I went to your house tonight, wanted to surprise you with those fishing lures, your anniversary gift." Blake leaned closer. "Take your time." "I used my spare key. Thought you were asleep. Heard voices in your study." Tyler's good eye, burning with a desperate intensity, fixed on Blake. "Candace was there, with Derek Walsh. They weren't alone." Blake's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, not alone?" "Two other guys, big guys, military-looking." Tyler struggled to continue. "I hid behind the bookshelf. They were talking about an accident plan for you, Blake. Candace was crying, saying she couldn't go through with it anymore, but Derek kept pushing her." The room seemed to tilt. Blake gripped the bed rail, his knuckles white. "An accident plan." "Derek said they'd already arranged everything. Make it look like a training accident during one of your security demonstrations. The insurance money and the house, they'd split it all." Tyler's voice cracked. "I tried to record it on my phone, but they saw me. Derek's guys. They beat me unconscious. Left me in the alley behind Murphy's bar." Blake stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His reflection stared back at him, a man who had survived insurgent attacks, hostage rescues, and classified operations that would never see the light of day. Yet he had never imagined the enemy would be sleeping in his own bed. "There's more," Tyler whispered. "Before they knocked me out, I heard Derek talking about a timeline. Something about your hunting trip next weekend, Blake. They're planning to kill you." the hunting trip, Blake's annual solo expedition to his cabin in the Colorado mountains. 3 days of isolation, a perfect stage for a manufactured accident. He had mentioned it to Candace weeks ago, and she'd enthusiastically encouraged him to go, citing his need for relaxation. Blake returned to Tyler's bedside, his expression hardening into something his former teammates would instantly recognize: the cold, calculating mask of the Phantom. "Did you get any of it recorded?" Tyler nodded weakly. "Phone's in my jacket." "Battery died before they found me, but I got about 2 minutes." Blake retrieved the phone and scrolled to the voice memo. Despite the poor audio quality, Candace's voice was unmistakable. "I don't know if I can watch him die, Derek. What if something goes wrong?" And then Derek's chilling response: "It'll look clean. My contacts know what they're doing." "By Sunday night, you'll be a grieving widow with a very comfortable future." The recording continued, revealing more damning details. The $2 million insurance policy Blake had increased at Candace's suggestion, the fake suicide note they'd prepared, in case the accident failed, and most damning of all, Derek's casual mention of his 2 previous wives' unfortunate accidents. Blake saved the recording to multiple backups, his mind already shifting into operational mode. 12 years of special operations had ingrained the immutable truth: successful missions demanded patience, meticulous planning, and precise execution. His enemies had revealed their hand too early, granting him the decisive advantage. "Tyler, I need you to listen carefully," Blake said, his voice dropping to the deadly quiet tone his former squad had learned to fear. "Tomorrow you're going to tell the police you were mugged by random strangers. You never saw their faces clearly. You don't mention Candace or Derek. But Blake, they think you're neutralized as a threat. Let them keep thinking that while I handle this." Blake's eyes had taken on a cold gleam. "They forgot something important about me, little brother. In Iraq, they called me the Phantom because my enemies never saw me coming until it was too late." Tyler grabbed Blake's uninjured hand. "What are you going to do?" Blake smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "I'm going to give them exactly what they planned for me. But first, I'm going home to play the loving husband while I plan their destruction." As Blake left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a text from Candace. "Hope Tyler's okay. I'll wait up for you. Love you." The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. She was likely practicing her grieving widow routine, even as she texted her lover about their anticipated success. But Blake Morrison was no naive civilian to crumble and beg for his marriage. He was a weapon forged in the crucible of warfare, and he was about to remind everyone why they called him the Phantom. The war was coming home, and Blake intended to win it. Absolutely. At 4:30 a.m., Blake slipped back into his house, moving with the spectral silence that had cemented his legend among special forces. Candace lay sprawled across their bed, her breathing deep and regular, a testament to the tranquilizer's hold. She'd claimed the mattress diagonally, an unconscious declaration of territory that was no longer his. He studied her face in the moonlight filtering through the windows. 3 years of marriage, and he realized he'd never truly known the woman beside him. The tears she'd shed on their wedding day, the fervent nights of their early relationship, the way she'd cradled him after nightmares of his overseas tours. Had any of it been real? Blake changed clothes silently and glided into his study, the very room where Tyler had stumbled upon the chilling conspiracy against his life. He powered on his computer, commencing the intricate dance of intelligence gathering, a skill he'd mastered in the shadows. Derek Walsh's background check yielded disturbing patterns. Born Derek Walsh Patterson in Tampa, he had legally changed his name after his first wife's accidental drowning during their Bahamas honeymoon 7 years prior. His second wife had met her end in a hiking accident in Utah 3 years later, leaving Derek as the sole beneficiary of a substantial inheritance from her family's pharmaceutical fortune. The man was a predator, a maestro of murdering wealthy women while meticulously maintaining plausible deniability. Blake cross-referenced the dates and locations, uncovering Derek's migratory habits: 5 different states over the past decade, always departing after a significant financial windfall. But this time, Derek had made one fatal miscalculation. He had chosen the wrong target. Blake pulled up his secure contact database. 12 years of special operations had woven a complex web of connections: soldiers, intelligence officers, contractors who thrived in the murky space between legal and necessary, men and women who understood that some problems demanded unconventional solutions. His first call went to Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez, his former squad mate, now at the helm of a private security firm in Denver. Tank specialized in discrete problem solving for clients who preferred to operate outside the confines of the legal system. Blake, Jesus, it's 5:08 a.m. This better be life or death. It is. I need a favor, Tank, a big one. Blake outlined the situation, carefully omitting specific names or locations. Tank listened with the professional silence of a man who had heard worse tales and executed darker deeds. "How clean you need this?" Tank asked when Blake finished. "Clean enough that they disappear completely, but not so clean that they don't suffer first. I want them to know exactly why this is happening to them. That's going to cost extra. Money is not an issue." His second call was to Rebecca Ice Santos, a former military intelligence analyst who now ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate espionage and digital surveillance. If Derek had additional conspirators or hidden assets, ICE would unearth them. "Blake Morrison," she answered on the first ring despite the ungodly hour. "Haven't heard from you since the Blackwater contract in Syria. What kind of ghost are you hunting now?" Blake sent her Derek's information and a concise summary of the unfolding nightmare. Within an hour, ICE had infiltrated Derek's digital life, exposing encrypted communications with a network of contractors who specialized in engineered accidental deaths. The evidence was staggering. Derek wasn't merely a serial killer. He was running a sophisticated operation targeting wealthy women across multiple states. "Blake, this guy's got a body count of at least 8 women over the past 15 years, ICE reported. "He's got a team of 3 regulars who handle the wet work, plus local contractors depending on the location. Your wife isn't his first target in your area. He tested his operation on a widow named Patricia Hoffman 6 months ago." Blake remembered Patricia. She had been found dead at the bottom of her stairs, an apparent accident. Wealthy, recently widowed, living alone, the perfect test run for Derek's chilling plan. "There's more," ICE continued. "Your wife's not just a victim in this, she's an active participant. Her phone records show she's been in contact with Derek for 8 months, since before he even moved to your neighborhood. She specifically sought him out through a dating app, even while married to you." Blake absorbed this information with a cold, simmering fury. Candace hadn't been seduced or manipulated. She had been a willing conspirator from the very beginning. His third call went to Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a psychiatrist specializing in treating Special Forces veterans who occasionally consulted on psychological warfare tactics. Blake needed to dissect Derek's mindset to exploit his weaknesses. The profile you're describing suggests a narcissistic psychopath with severe impulse control regarding financial gain, Dr. Hayes explained after Blake presented a hypothetical case study. These individuals typically have elaborate backup plans, but also specific psychological triggers they can't resist demonstrating their superiority, especially when they believe they're in control. What kind of triggers? Humiliation. Call went to Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a psychiatrist specializing in treating Special Forces veterans who occasionally consulted on psychological warfare tactics. Blake needed to dissect Derek's mindset to exploit his weaknesses. The profile you're describing suggests a narcissistic psychopath with severe impulse control regarding financial gain, Dr. Hayes explained after Blake presented a hypothetical case study. These individuals typically have elaborate backup plans, but also specific psychological triggers they can't resist demonstrating their superiority, especially when they believe they're in control. What kind of triggers? Humiliation. Loss of control. Having their intelligence questioned. They also tend to keep trophies, evidence of their successful manipulations. If you want to draw this person out, make them feel intellectually superior while secretly documenting their confessions. By noon, Blake had meticulously crafted a comprehensive battle plan. Phase 1. Allow Derek and Candace to believe their original scheme was proceeding smoothly while Blake amassed additional evidence. Phase 2. Spring the trap, leveraging Derek's psychological vulnerabilities against him. Phase 3. The execution of justice, permanent and untraceable. Candace awoke at 11 a.m., stumbling downstairs in her silk robe, a practiced vulnerability etched on her features. "How's Tyler? You were gone so long." "He was mugged downtown." "Broken jaw, but he'll recover." Blake watched her face carefully. She displayed perfect concern, slightly widened eyes, pursed lips, a gentle hand on his arm. "Oh my God, that's terrible." "What did the police say?" "They're investigating, but Tyler couldn't identify his attackers. Random crime, probably." Relief flickered across her features before she composed herself. "Should we visit him today?" "Tomorrow." "He's sedated now and the doctors want him to rest." Blake pulled her into an embrace, feeling her body tense slightly before she relaxed into the performance. "I was thinking about our anniversary dinner last night. Maybe we should plan something special for this weekend." "This weekend?" Her voice pitched slightly higher. "I was going to go hunting, but I'd rather spend time with you." "We could drive to that bed and breakfast in Asheville you mentioned." Panic flashed in her eyes before she wrestled it back. "Actually, I think you should go hunting. You've been so stressed with work lately. The mountains would do you good." "Are you sure? I don't want to leave you alone." "I'll be fine. Derek offered to check on me if you were gone. Such a sweet neighbor." Blake smiled and kissed her forehead. "You're right. The mountains will be perfect." As Candace ascended the stairs to shower, Blake activated the hidden recording equipment he'd installed throughout the house during his errands that morning. Every conversation, every phone call, every whispered consultation with Derek would be meticulously documented. The game had begun, and Blake Morrison was playing to win. For the next 2 days, Blake inhabited the skin of the unsuspecting husband, all the while meticulously weaving an intricate web of surveillance around Derek and Candace. His military training had etched an unwavering truth into his very core. Successful operations demanded overwhelming intelligence, and he intended to know every minute detail of their sinister plan before he made his move. Wednesday morning brought an unforeseen opportunity. Derek Walsh, ever the picture of the concerned neighbor, knocked on Blake's front door at 7 a.m., a steaming coffee in hand. Blake, I heard about Tyler from Candace. Terrible thing. I wanted to offer my help if you need anything. Blake invited him in, his gaze a silent assessment of Derek's body language. The man exuded confidence, almost an arrogant swagger, coupled with the practiced charm of a seasoned predator. At 42, Derek maintained himself immaculately. Expensive clothes, a dazzling smile, manicured nails. He radiated success, a potent allure for women like Candace who valued appearances above all else. I appreciate that, Derek. Tyler's going to be fine, but it's been stressful. I can imagine. Random violence is terrifying. Derek's eyes swept the room, lingering on family photos and expensive electronics, a predator cataloging his prey's assets. Candace mentioned you're planning a hunting trip this weekend. Probably good timing for some stress relief. Yeah, my annual solo trip to Colorado, 3 days of peace and quiet. Blake watched Derek's micro-expressions with surgical precision. The man's pupils dilated ever so slightly, his breathing quickened. Classic tells of burgeoning excitement. Sounds perfect. I'm actually a hunter myself, though I prefer more social situations. Derek smiled. Maybe next time we could arrange a group trip. Blake doubted Derek would be alive for a next time, but he nodded agreeably. I'd like that. Where do you usually hunt? Derek launched into detailed anecdotes about his hunting expeditions, and Blake realized the man possessed genuine knowledge of weapons, terrain, and, chillingly, hunting accidents. He wasn't just planning murder, he was meticulously orchestrating the perfect hunting accident, complete with realistic details that would satisfy any unsuspecting investigator. After Derek departed, Blake activated his secure communication system and contacted Tank Rodriguez with an urgent update. I need accelerated deployment, Blake stated. They're moving faster than anticipated. Copy that. My team's already in position outside Denver. We can be at your location in 12 hours if needed. Negative. I want them to spring their trap first. Let them think they've succeeded before we reveal the truth. Blake's second call was to Rebecca Santos, who had been monitoring Derek's digital communications around the clock. Blake, you need to hear this, she said immediately. Derek made 3 calls last night after visiting you. First to a contact in Colorado. They're planning to sabotage your hunting cabin's propane system. Make it look like a gas leak explosion. Who's the contact? Guy named Vincent Torres, former Army demolitions expert with a dishonorable discharge. He's been working freelance for Derek's operation for 2 years. Already killed 4 people in apparent accidents. Blake felt the familiar, chilling calm that descended before combat operations. What else? Second call was to your wife. They're planning to establish her alibi by having her attend a neighborhood book club meeting Friday night, then a charity brunch Saturday morning. She'll be highly visible with multiple witnesses when your accident occurs. And the third call, this one's interesting. Derek called someone named Amanda Cross in Phoenix. Apparently she's his next target after Candace, another wealthy widow he's been grooming online. He told her about his successful operation in progress and how she'd be next in line for his services. Blake committed Amanda Cross's information to memory. If Derek had a pattern of future victims, Blake would ensure they were warned, but only after he completed his current, intensely personal mission. That afternoon, Blake visited Tyler in the hospital. His brother's condition had improved slightly. The swelling had reduced enough that one eye could partially open. How are you holding up? Tyler asked through his wired jaw. Better than them, Blake replied grimly. I need you to know something, Tyler. After this weekend, Candace and Derek won't be a problem anymore. Tyler studied his brother's face with growing concern. Blake, whatever you're planning. They made two fatal mistakes, Blake interrupted, his voice a low, dangerous growl. First, they underestimated who they were targeting. Second, they hurt my family. I've killed enemies for less than that. Don't throw your life away for revenge. Blake leaned closer to his brother. This isn't revenge, Tyler. This is justice, and when I'm finished, there won't be a shred of evidence linking me to their grim fate this Thursday evening. Blake sat ensconced in his study, the unsettling tableau of domestic normalcy playing out as Candace prepared dinner. The charade was almost artful, yet his hidden cameras had captured every damning detail. 3 phone conversations between Candace and Derek throughout the day, each more chilling than the last. The first call revealed a flicker of doubt in Candace's voice. What if something goes wrong? What if they trace it back to us? She'd fretted. Derek's reply had been a chilling balm. Vincent's done this dozens of times. Your husband will be vaporized along with half the cabin. They'll find fragments at best. The second call laid bare their macabre post-murder plans. We'll wait 6 months before going public with our relationship, Derek had purred. Grieving widow finding love again, it's a beautiful story. The insurance money will be cleared by then. But the third call, oh, that was the most revealing. Derek, his patience worn thin by Candace's jitters, had unwittingly exposed the dark heart of their enterprise. Listen to me carefully. I've done this 8 times before, and I've never been caught. Your husband is just another target. Stop thinking of him as your husband and start thinking of him as our payday. Blake meticulously saved every recording to multiple secure servers, a grim insurance policy ensuring that even if he met an untimely end, the truth would survive. But dying in Colorado was not in his plans. Derek Torres and Vincent Torres were about to discover that hunting the Phantom demanded a mastery of skills they simply didn't possess. Friday morning dawned, the windows dusted with the ethereal touch of October snow. Blake loaded his truck, not just with hunting gear and camping equipment, but with an arsenal of military-grade surveillance tools, explosive countermeasures, and communication devices that would allow him to orchestrate his counterstrike with Tank's team in real time. Candace, a picture of flawless devotion, kissed him goodbye at the front door. Be safe out there. Come back to me. I will, Blake promised, the words imbued with a meaning she couldn't possibly comprehend. As he drove toward the Colorado mountains, Blake's secure phone vibrated with a final, crucial update from Rebecca Santos. Vincent Torres arrived at your cabin location yesterday. Derek's flying to Denver this morning to be close enough to confirm the kill personally. They want to be certain you're dead before they celebrate. Blake's lips curved into a grim smile as he turned onto the winding mountain highway. Derek wanted to be close enough to confirm the kill. Perfect. Blake would ensure Derek had a front-row seat to the real show. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and Blake Morrison was exceptionally good at his job. Into the wolf's den. Blake's cabin, nestled in a remote valley 30 miles outside Aspen, was a testament to isolation. Accessible only by a winding mountain road he'd deliberately chosen for its seclusion, he'd purchased the property 5 years ago as a sanctuary from the civilized world. He never imagined it would become the stage for his deadliest operation. As his truck ascended the final switchbacks, Blake activated his counter-surveillance equipment. The readings confirmed Rebecca Santos's dire warnings. Vincent Torres had been busy. Heat signatures betrayed improvised explosive devices rigged to the cabin's propane system, motion sensors strategically placed along the approach routes, and at least 3 distinct trigger mechanisms designed to transform his peaceful retreat into a crematorium. Blake parked his truck a quarter-mile from the cabin and began his approach on foot, moving with the practiced stealth that had made him legendary in Iraqi urban warfare. The October snow, a silent accomplice, muffled his footsteps while starkly revealing the tracks of his would-be assassin. Vincent Torres had made his first fatal error by underestimating his quarry. The man had positioned himself in a hunting blind 200 yards from the cabin, expecting to observe Blake's demise from a safe distance. He'd set up professional-grade equipment, night vision scopes, long-range communication gear, and a sniper rifle as a fallback should the explosives fail. What Vincent didn't know was that Blake had been tracking him for the past hour, utilizing thermal imaging equipment the military hadn't even declassified yet. Tank Rodriguez had supplied cutting-edge surveillance gear that rendered Vincent's setup laughably primitive by comparison. Blake circled behind Vincent's position, exploiting the inherent blind spot every sniper creates when fixated on a target. At 4:30 p.m., as twilight began to descend over the mountains, Blake made his move. Vincent Torres never heard him coming. One moment he was peering through his scope, awaiting Blake's fatal entry into the cabin. The next, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth while the chilling kiss of a suppressed pistol pressed against the base of his skull. "Vincent Torres," Blake whispered, his voice resonating with the deadly calm that had terrorized insurgents from Fallujah to Kandahar. Former army demolitions, dishonorable discharge for theft and insubordination. Currently employed by Derek Walsh in the murder-for-hire business. Vincent struggled, but Blake's grip was unyielding. 12 years of hand-to-hand combat training, sharpened by the simmering rage over his brother's brutal beating, rendered resistance futile. "Here's what's going to happen," Blake continued. "You're going to call Derek Walsh and confirm that I entered the cabin. Tell him the explosives detonated perfectly and that I'm dead. Then you're going to answer some questions about your operation." Blake eased the pressure on Vincent's mouth slightly. "If you try to warn Derek or signal for help, I'll put a bullet in your spine and leave you paralyzed in these mountains. The bears will find you before any rescue team does. Understand?" Vincent nodded frantically. Blake handed him a secure phone, Derek's number already dialed. "Remember," Blake whispered, "I can kill you in a dozen different ways without making a sound. Don't test me." Vincent made the call, Blake's gun pressed against his temple. His voice shook slightly, but he delivered the chilling message. "Package delivered. Target eliminated. Explosion was perfect. Nothing left to identify." Derek's voice crackled through the speaker, excited and triumphant. "Excellent work, Vincent. Any witnesses?" "Negative. Completely isolated. I'm cleaning up the site now and will exfiltrate as planned." "Perfect. Send me the photos for confirmation, then get out of there. I'll wire your payment tonight." Blake ended the call, a cold smile playing on his lips. Derek thought he was celebrating success, but he'd just signed his own death warrant. "Now," Blake said, forcing Vincent to his knees, "let's discuss your employment history with Derek Walsh." What followed was a brutal 30-minute interrogation that laid bare the full scope of Derek's nefarious operation. Vincent had participated in 12 murders over the past 3 years, each meticulously disguised as an accident. Derek recruited veterans with criminal records, luring them with substantial payments for jobs traditional hitmen wouldn't touch. "He's got a whole network," Vincent gasped, blood trickling from his nose where Blake had encouraged his cooperation. "Ex-military, former law enforcement guys who can't get legitimate work. He calls us his cleanup crew." How many active operators? Blake pressed. 6 regulars, maybe a dozen freelancers, depending on the job. Derek's got contracts lined up for the next 2 years. Rich widows, inheritance disputes, insurance fraud. Guys making millions. Blake recorded everything on his secure device, meticulously building a comprehensive case file that would ensure Derek's entire network was exposed. But first, he had personal business to finish. "You beat my brother," Blake said quietly, his voice a low growl. "Put him in the hospital with a broken jaw." Vincent's eyes widened in terror as the horrific realization of who he was facing dawned upon him. "Those were orders, man," Vincent stammered, his desperation palpable. "Clean up loose ends. I was just following." Blake's fist connected with Vincent's solar plexus, dropping him to the ground, gasping for air. "My brother is a school teacher. He's never hurt anyone in his life." Blake zip-tied Vincent's hands and feet, then secured him to a tree 20 yards from his hunting blind. The man would survive the night if the cold didn't claim him, but he wouldn't be calling for help any time soon. "Stay quiet, and you might live until the authorities find you," Blake said. "Make noise, and the bears will find you first." Blake returned to Vincent's position and began orchestrating the next phase of his operation. Using Vincent's own equipment, he staged a series of photographs depicting a massive explosion at his cabin location. The images were convincing enough to satisfy Derek's need for confirmation while leaving Blake officially dead. As night descended over the Colorado mountains, Blake activated his satellite communication system and contacted Tank Rodriguez. "Our Phase 1 complete," Blake reported. "Target believes primary is eliminated, ready for Phase 2 deployment." "Copy that," Tank responded. "My team's in position outside Denver. Derek Walsh just checked into the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Probably planning to celebrate. You want us to move on him now?" "Negative. Let him enjoy his victory for one more night. Tomorrow we spring the real trap." Blake settled into Vincent's abandoned hunting blind, his scope trained on the distant lights of Denver. Somewhere in that city, Derek Walsh was undoubtedly toasting his successful murder, perhaps even planning his next move with Candace. They believed they'd eliminated the only threat to their wicked scheme. Tomorrow they would learn the stark difference between killing a man and hunting the phantom. The Trap Springs, Derek Walsh awoke Saturday morning in his opulent Denver hotel suite, feeling like a king. The previous evening's celebration had been perfect. Expensive champagne, a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains, and the profound satisfaction of another flawlessly executed operation. By his calculations, Candace's inheritance would be processed within 6 months, granting them access to over $3 million from Blake's life insurance and their combined assets. His secure phone buzzed with a text from Candace. "Media reports about explosion in mountains. Haven't heard from Blake. Should I call police?" Derek smiled as he typed his response. "Wait until Sunday evening. Don't seem too eager. Remember, you're a worried wife waiting for her husband to return." Derek's phone rang immediately. Vincent Torres. His voice sounded strained, almost panicked. "Change of plans." Vincent's voice sounded strained, almost panicked. "We need to meet." "There's been a complication." Derek's confidence wavered slightly. "What kind of complication?" "You confirmed the target was eliminated." "I can't discuss it over the phone. Meet me at the warehouse at noon. Come alone." The line went dead, leaving Derek staring at his phone with growing unease. Vincent had never sounded like that before, desperate, almost frightened. But Derek pushed down his concerns. The operation had been flawless. Whatever Vincent was worried about could be handled. Derek drove to the warehouse district outside Denver, where he maintained a storage facility for his illicit operations. The building was perfect for sensitive meetings, isolated, soundproof, and registered under one of his many false identities. He arrived at 11:45 a.m. to find Vincent's truck already in the parking lot, but something immediately felt wrong. The warehouse loading dock was open, a breach Vincent never would have committed without explicit instructions. Derek drew his concealed pistol and approached cautiously. Inside the cavernous warehouse, he found Vincent Torres secured to a metal chair with zip ties, his face bruised and bloodied. But Vincent was conscious, staring directly at Derek with an expression of absolute terror. "Hello, Derek." The voice came from behind him, calm and controlled. Derek spun around to find Blake Morrison standing in the shadows near the warehouse entrance, very much alive and pointing a military-grade assault rifle directly at Derek's chest. "Impossible," Derek whispered, his mind reeling. "Vincent confirmed the kill. I saw the explosion photos." Blake stepped into the faint light, and Derek saw something in his eyes that froze his blood. This wasn't the suburban security consultant Derek had been planning to murder. This was a predator, a killer who moved with the fluid grace of someone who had ended lives professionally. "Vincent's been very helpful," Blake said conversationally. "He told me all about your operation. 12 murders in 3 years, each one disguised as an accident. Your network of ex-military contractors. Your plans for Candace and me." Derek raised his pistol, but Blake was faster. A single shot from Blake's rifle sent Derek's gun spinning across the warehouse floor, along with 2 of Derek's fingers. Derek collapsed, screaming, clutching his mangled hand against his chest. Blood poured between his fingers as he stared up at Blake in shock and agony. "That's for my brother's broken jaw," Blake said coldly. "Tyler's a school teacher, Derek. He's never hurt anyone in his life." "But your animals beat him unconscious for witnessing your conspiracy." Blake zip-tied Derek's uninjured hand to the chair beside Vincent's, creating a grotesque tableau of the 2 conspirators bound together in the very warehouse Derek had thought was his sanctuary. "Let me explain what's going to happen," Blake continued, activating a video camera mounted on a tripod. "First, you're both going to confess to every murder you've committed. Names, dates, methods, everything. I already have enough evidence to destroy your entire network, but I want complete documentation." "You can't do this," Derek gasped through his pain. "I'm a lawyer. I have rights." Blake laughed, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "Rights? Like the rights of the women you murdered? Like my brother's right not to be beaten half to death." Blake showed Derek the extensive files he'd compiled. Financial records, victim profiles, recorded phone conversations between Derek and Candace, and Vincent's detailed confession from the mountains. "Your entire operation is already documented," Blake explained. "Every victim, every conspirator, every offshore account. But I want to hear it from you personally before I decide what happens next." Derek's lawyer instincts remarkably kicked in despite his agonizing pain. "What do you want? Money? I can transfer millions to your accounts. We can make a deal." "A deal?" Blake's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You plan to murder me and steal my wife. You've killed at least 12 innocent women. You had my brother beaten nearly to death. What kind of deal did you think we could make?" Blake pulled up a chair and sat facing his prisoners, the assault rifle resting casually across his knees. "Here's the only deal available. You confess to everything on camera, and I'll make sure your deaths are quick and clean. Try to lie or negotiate, and I'll take my time." Vincent broke first, pouring out details of every job he'd done for Derek. The man was a coward, bullied into working for Derek through financial desperation and threats. Blake felt no sympathy for him, but Vincent's cooperation was useful for building the complete case file. Derek held out longer, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity even as his severed fingers continued bleeding onto the warehouse floor. But when Blake began describing in clinical detail exactly how he'd killed enemy combatants during his military service, Derek's nerve broke completely. All right, I'll tell you everything. Just make it quick when you're done." What followed was 3 hours of the most comprehensive confession in criminal history. Derek detailed not just his own murders, but an entire network of killers for hire operating across the western United States. He named names, revealed bank accounts, and provided evidence that would send dozens of people to prison for life. By 4 p.m., Blake had everything he needed: 2 complete confessions, financial records, and enough evidence to dismantle Derek's entire organization. "There's just one more thing," Blake said, standing and shouldering his rifle. "I want you to call Candace." Derek stared at him in confusion. "Call her? Why?" "Because she's still expecting you to return home and celebrate our successful murder. I think she deserves to know how this story really ends." Blake forced Derek to dial Candace's number on speakerphone. When she answered, her voice was bright with anticipation. "Derek, how did everything go? Are we safe?" Derek looked at Blake's cold expression and the rifle pointed at his head. "Candace," he said hoarsely, "there's been a problem." He swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. Blake isn't dead." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 agonizing seconds before Candace whispered, "What do you mean he's not dead?" "I mean," Blake said, taking the phone, "that your husband is very much alive and he's been looking forward to coming home to have a conversation with his loving wife." Blake ended the call and smiled at Derek's terrified expression. "Don't worry about Candace. I have special plans for her." Homecoming. Blake Morrison drove through the quiet streets of Westbrook subdivision at 8 p.m. Saturday evening, his truck's headlights cutting through the October darkness. To any observer, he looked like a man returning from a successful hunting trip, slightly tired, satisfied, ready to reunite with his wife after 3 days in the mountains. But in the truck bed, beneath a tarp and hunting gear, lay evidence bags containing Derek Walsh's personal effects, Vincent Torres's confession recordings, and detailed documentation of a murder-for-hire network that had operated across multiple states. Derek and Vincent themselves would never be found. The abandoned mine shaft in the Colorado mountains where Blake had disposed of their bodies was over 400 feet deep and had been sealed for decades. The lights were on in Blake's house, and Candace's BMW sat in the driveway exactly where she'd left it. But Blake knew she hadn't been alone. Since his chilling phone call from the warehouse, his hidden surveillance cameras had recorded her frantic phone calls to Derek's emergency contacts, her desperate attempts to flee the house only to return when she realized she had nowhere to run, and her mounting panic as the terrifying reality of her situation became chillingly clear. Blake parked in his garage and entered through the kitchen, moving with the casual ease of a man returning from vacation. He found Candace in the living room, sitting rigidly on their leather sofa, her hands folded in her lap. She was dressed carefully, a conservative blouse, minimal makeup, the very picture of a worried wife awaiting news about her missing husband. "Blake," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "thank God you're safe. I was so worried when you didn't call." Blake set his duffel bag down and studied his wife's performance. Even now, knowing she'd meticulously planned his murder, she was still trying to maintain the charade. The audacity was almost impressive. My phone died on the mountain, Blake said conversationally. Sorry I worried you. Did anything interesting happen while I was gone? Candace's composure wavered slightly. Nothing special. I went to book club Friday night, then the charity brunch this morning. Just kept busy. Blake nodded and moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a whiskey. That's funny. I tried calling Derek to ask him to check on you, but his phone went straight to voicemail. You haven't heard from him, have you? The color drained from Candace's face. Derek? No, why would I hear from Derek? Blake took a slow sip of his whiskey, watching Candace's micro-expressions with the analytical eye of a trained interrogator. Fear, desperation, and cold calculation flickered across her features as she struggled to process the implications of Derek's silence. Candace, Blake said quietly, I need you to know that I love you, loved you. Despite everything you've done, part of me still remembers the woman I married. Candace's carefully constructed mask began to crack. Blake, I don't understand what you're talking about. 3 years of marriage, Blake continued, settling into the armchair across from her. 3 years of sharing a bed, planning a future, talking about children. Was any of it real, or were you planning this from the beginning? Planning what, Blake? You're scaring me. Blake pulled out his phone and played the recording Tyler had made in this very room 3 nights ago. Candace's voice filled the living room. I don't know if I can watch him die, Derek. What if something goes wrong? Candace's face went completely white as Derek's recorded response followed. It'll look clean. My contacts know what they're doing. By Sunday night, you'll be a grieving widow with a very comfortable future. Tyler heard everything, Blake said when the recording ended. Your plan to murder me, your timeline, your financial arrangements with Derek. His voice hardened. He tried to record it as evidence, and Derek's animals beat him half to death for it. Candace stared at the phone in Blake's hand, her mouth opening and closing silently. The sophisticated, beautiful woman who had charmed her way into Blake's life had been reduced to a cornered animal. Blake, please, she finally whispered. I can explain everything. Derek manipulated me. He said he loved me, that he wanted to take care of me. I never wanted you to get hurt. Blake played another recording, Candace's phone conversation with Derek from just 6 hours ago. Derek, how did everything go? Are we safe? That doesn't sound like a manipulated victim, Blake observed. That sounds like a conspirator celebrating a successful murder. Candace suddenly lunged for the front door, but Blake had anticipated the move. He caught her wrist easily, his grip unbreakable after years of military training. Sit down, Candace. We're going to finish this conversation. Blake guided her back to the sofa, noting how she flinched at his touch. For 3 years, she'd hidden her revulsion behind the mask of a loving wife, but now her true feelings were impossible to conceal. How long have you been planning this? Blake asked. When Candace didn't respond, Blake showed her printed copies of her phone records dating back 8 months. Rebecca Santos is very good at her job. Your first contact with Derek was March 15th through a dating app called Discreet Connections. You initiated the conversation. Blake spread the evidence across their coffee table like a prosecutor laying out a devastating case. Phone records, financial documents, Derek's confession video, and the photographs from the warehouse. Derek told me everything before he died. Blake's voice was a chilling whisper, devoid of emotion. Every twisted detail of your plan, every whispered conversation you had, every single murder he'd committed before setting his sights on me. Did you truly believe you were his first married target? He'd already extinguished the lives of two other wives using the exact same depraved method. Candace's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Convulsive sobs racked her, but Blake felt no tremor of sympathy. These weren't tears of genuine remorse, but the bitter, self-pitying cries of a cornered animal. "I never meant for Tyler to get hurt," she gasped, words ripped from her throat by each ragged sob. "I begged Derek. I told him we should just leave, disappear, but he swore you'd hunt us down, never stop until you found us." He was right about that. Blake's voice was a frigid blade, cutting through her pathetic wails. "But you, Candace, made one fatal, catastrophic error in judgment. You dared to assume I was merely another docile suburban husband, a soft target, easily eliminated." Blake leaned forward, his voice dropping to that deadly quiet tone that had struck terror into the hearts of his enemies from the scorching sands of Iraq to the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. "Did Derek ever bother to tell you about my military service? Did he ever research what they called me in Iraq?" Candace shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "The Phantom," Blake continued, each word a hammer blow, "because my enemies never saw me coming until it was far, far too late. Derek believed he was hunting a civilian, an easy mark. Instead, he was hunting a man who had ended more lives than he could possibly count, all in the unwavering service of his country." Blake rose, moving to the window, his gaze sweeping over the deceptively peaceful suburban street where he'd once hoped to forge a normal existence. "I'm going to offer you a choice, Candace, the very same choice I extended to Derek and Vincent." He turned, his expression utterly devoid of human feeling. "You can confess everything to the FBI tomorrow morning, Derek's entire sprawling network, your insidious role in planning my murder, every minute detail of your conspiracy. You'll spend the rest of your wretched life in prison, but you will at least be alive. What's the alternative?" Candace's voice was barely a whisper, a thread of sound in the sudden, crushing silence. Blake smiled, but there was nothing remotely human in that chilling expression. "You can attempt to run, try to vanish, to carve out a new life somewhere Derek's network can't reach you. But you should know this, Candace. I will be hunting you. And when I find you, and I will find you, what happens next won't be as swift, as merciful, as what befell Derek." Candace stared at him, absolute paralyzing terror seizing her. The gentle husband she had so meticulously plotted to murder had never truly existed. The man standing before her was a predator, refined over 12 years, perfecting the very art of killing. And she, in her monstrous arrogance, had made the fatal mistake of becoming his prey. "Choose now." Blake's voice was dangerously quiet. "Prison or running. Either way, this marriage is a cadaver." FBI agent Sarah Chin had witnessed a lifetime of confessions in her 15-year career, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared her for the woman sitting across from her in the sterile interrogation room of the federal building. Candace Morrison had arrived that Sunday morning not with a whimper, but with a roar, a team of high-powered lawyers, a towering stack of evidence that could fill a warehouse, and a story that promised to dismantle one of the largest murder-for-hire networks in American history. "Let me fully comprehend this," Agent Chin said, her eyes scanning her notes, a flicker of disbelief in their depths. "Your husband discovered your elaborate plot to have him murdered, personally tracked down your conspirators in Colorado, and then inexplicably convinced you to surrender yourself rather than face his own very personal brand of justice." Candace Saya. nodded, her eyes rimmed with the redness of 1,000 tears, yet her voice was miraculously steady. The raw, primal terror that Blake had ignited within her had been replaced by a chilling, resolute determination. "Blake Morrison is not a man you want hunting you," she stated, a stark truth. "I would rather languish my life away in federal prison than spend another moment looking over my shoulder." Agent Chin activated the recording equipment. "Tell me about Derek Walsh and his organization." What followed was an 8-hour deluge, the most comprehensive confession in the annals of FBI history. Candace meticulously laid bare not just her own conspiracy to extinguish Blake's life, but Derek's entire sprawling network of cold-blooded killers for hire, names, clandestine bank accounts, chilling victim profiles, and operational methods that stretched across 12 states encompassing over 30 active participants. Derek kept meticulous records, Candace explained, a strange, detached tone in her voice. He was utterly obsessed with documenting his grotesque successes. He showed me files on dozens of victims, affluent women, vicious inheritance disputes, elaborate insurance fraud cases. He treated murder as if it were nothing more than a profitable business venture. Agent Chin cross-referenced Candace's deluge of information with ongoing investigations and a myriad of unsolved cases. The connections were simply staggering. Dozens of seemingly accidental deaths suddenly made horrifying sense, revealed as precisely coordinated murders. "What happened to Derek Walsh and Vincent Torres?" Agent Chin pressed, her gaze piercing. Candace met her eyes directly, unblinking. "Blake said they wouldn't be a problem anymore. I believe him." Monday morning exploded with coordinated FBI raids across 7 states. Derek's network, bloated with years of undisturbed success, had grown lethally complacent. Most of the conspirators were apprehended without even a whisper of resistance. Bank accounts were instantly frozen, mountains of damning evidence seized, and a murder operation that had claimed over 40 lives was utterly dismantled in a single decisive day. Blake Morrison sat in his study, a silent sentinel, watching the news coverage of the raids unfold across multiple screens. His secure phone vibrated constantly with hushed congratulations from former teammates, men who instantly recognized his ruthless handiwork, even though his name never materialized in any official report. "Tank Rodriguez," a voice crackled through the phone. "From Denver. Clean sweep on all targets. Your intelligence package was flawless. Any complications?" "None," Blake replied, a rare, almost imperceptible hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Half these guys confessed before we even finished reading them their rights. Your wife's testimony was the key that unlocked everything." Blake's house now felt profoundly different, emptier, cleaner. Like a festering wound that had finally, mercifully, stopped bleeding. Candace's belongings were gone, either donated to charity or utterly destroyed. He'd had the carpets ruthlessly replaced, the walls repainted, every surface that might harbor the faintest memory of their poisoned marriage scrubbed clean. Tyler arrived Tuesday afternoon, his jaw still painfully wired, yet his spirits remarkably improved. The news coverage had unequivocally vindicated his sacrifice, and the chilling knowledge that Derek's network could never inflict harm upon another soul had imbued his suffering with profound meaning. "You did it," Tyler said, carefully settling into Blake's worn leather chair. "They're all going down." "Candace will probably get 25 to life," Blake replied, a flat statement of fact. "The others will never see daylight again." Tyler studied his older brother's face, noting the stark absence of satisfaction or even relief. How do you feel about it? Blake considered the question with the solemnity of a man weighing a confession. Empty. I thought I'd feel something when it was over. Justice, closure, something. But I just feel empty. That's perfectly normal after combat operations, Tyler observed, his insight keen. You've been running on pure adrenaline and righteous anger for a week. Now that the mission's complete, you're processing what you've lost. Blake nodded. Tyler had always been the emotionally intelligent brother, possessing a rare ability to perceive the subtle nuances that Blake's rigorous military training had taught him to ruthlessly suppress. I killed the woman I loved, Blake said quietly, the words heavy with a desolate truth. Not physically, but I killed who I thought she was. The Candace I married never existed. I was in love with a lie. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. Amanda Cross, a phoenix rising from the ashes of a potential tragedy, flew in from Phoenix. She was the woman Derek had chillingly planned to target after extinguishing Blake's life. In her 40s, recently widowed, she possessed precisely the kind of vulnerable wealth that Derek specialized in preying upon. I wanted to thank you personally, she said, her voice resonant as she sat in Blake's living room, the very same space where Candace had received her terrifying ultimatum. Derek had been courting me for months. I was actually considering relocating foolishly to be closer to him. Blake studied Amanda's face, recognizing the keen intelligence and inherent strength that Derek, blinded by greed, had likely overlooked. You would have figured him out eventually. Perhaps, she conceded, a hint of steel in her voice. But by then it might have been irrevocably too late. Amanda extended a business card to Blake. I run a foundation that provides solace and assistance to victims of domestic violence and fraud. We would like to fund a program, a unique initiative, to identify and ultimately stop predators like Derek before they can wreak havoc on another life. Blake accepted the card, feeling a faint tremor, a stirring in the vast emptiness that had consumed him since Candace's arrest. What kind of program? Intelligence gathering, exhaustive background investigations, early warning systems for affluent women who might become prime targets, Amanda explained, her passion igniting. We desperately need someone with your unique, formidable skills to design the operation. For the first time in a week, a genuine spark of interest, faint but undeniable, flickered within Blake. Send me a proposal. I'll review it. Thursday evening brought a final grim piece of closure. Rebecca Santos called, her voice crisp and professional, with information about Derek's hidden offshore accounts and assets. Total recovery looks like $37 million, she reported, the numbers stark. Blood money accumulated over 4 decades of murder and fraud. The victims' families will be compensated, of course, but there's a substantial remainder. What happens to the excess? Blake asked, a cold irony settling over him. That's ultimately up to the courts, but given your pivotal role in exposing the network, you'd have a legitimate claim to a significant portion. Blake considered the profound irony. Derek's elaborate scheme to steal his wealth through murder had instead resulted in Blake inheriting Derek's ill-gotten fortune through the chilling hand of justice. Set up a trust, Blake decided, his voice firm. Use it to fund Amanda Cross's foundation and victim compensation. I want no part of Derek's money for myself. Friday marked 1 week since Tyler's brutal beating. 1 week since Blake's entire world had collapsed and then miraculously been painstakingly rebuilt. He sat in his study, reviewing the case files one final time before relinquishing them to the federal prosecutors. The evidence was overwhelming. Derek's network would be completely dismantled, dozens of cold cases would finally find their chilling answers, and countless future victims would be protected. Justice had been served comprehensively, yet Blake felt no surge of triumph, no satisfaction in victory. He had spent 12 years serving his country, fighting the shadowy enemies who threatened American lives and values. Now he had waged a more personal, visceral war against the enemies who had threatened his family and his very existence. The missions were complete, but Blake Morrison was still grappling with the profound question of who he was when he wasn't at war. 6 months after the FBI raids, Blake Morrison stood in the gleaming conference room of the Cross Foundation's new headquarters in Denver, meticulously reviewing intelligence reports that would have elicited grudging admiration from his former CIA contacts. The organization Amanda Cross had envisioned had blossomed into something far more sophisticated, a private intelligence network that identified and neutralized predators before they could claim their next victim. Target profile confirms pattern behavior, Rebecca Santos reported, her voice resonating from the wall of monitors displaying their current operation. Richard Kellerman, 45, recently relocated to Scottsdale after his second wife's accidental drowning in Lake Tahoe, currently targeting 3 wealthy widows simultaneously. Blake studied the surveillance photos and financial records meticulously spread across the table. Kellerman was Derek Walsh 2.0, charming, devastatingly sophisticated, and chillingly methodical in his approach to murder for profit. But unlike Derek, Kellerman had made the fatal mistake of operating in Blake's new area of expertise, local law enforcement, Blake queried. Unaware and critically understaffed, Tank Rodriguez replied from his position at the tactical displays. Scottsdale PD has the budget but not the experience to handle something this complex. They'd need 6 months to build a case that we've completed in 3 weeks. Amanda Cross entered the conference room carrying coffee, a satisfied expression gracing her features, the look of someone who had finally discovered her profound life's purpose. 6 months of working alongside Blake had honed her instincts, taught her to think like a predator hunter, and she had proven surprisingly adept at dissecting the criminal mind. Kellerman scheduled to take his primary target, Patricia Kellwood, on a weekend sailing trip to Catalina Island, Amanda reported, her voice crisp, the same chilling M.O. he used with his second wife. Blake nodded, his mind already shifting into cold, efficient operational mode. Timeline? This weekend. He's rented a luxury yacht, meticulously planned the route, even arranged for an alibi witness who will testify that Patricia was depressed and possibly suicidal. Blake had spent 6 months meticulously building this organization, fueled by Derek's blood money and his own extensive military connections. The Cross Foundation officially provided security consulting and victim advocacy services, but their true grim work involved hunting predators with the same ruthless precision Blake had once used against enemy combatants. Tank, what's our tactical package? Tank Rodriguez offered a grim smile, the expression of a man who relished his macabre work. Full surveillance team already in position in Scottsdale, electronic intercepts on all of Kellerman's communications. We've even got Coast Guard contacts who can respond to a maritime emergency within 30 minutes of our call. Blake's secure phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, who was back teaching but served as the Foundation's psychological consultant. Reviewed Kellerman's profile. Classic narcissistic psychopath with a messiah complex. Won't be able to resist demonstrating his superiority when confronted. The past 6 months had proven profoundly therapeutic for both brothers. Tyler's physical injuries had healed completely, But the emotional trauma of discovering humanity's chilling capacity for evil had necessitated professional help. Working with the Foundation had given him a profound sense of purpose, a vital role in fighting the darkness he had witnessed. For Blake, the Foundation had provided something he had never expected to find after leaving the military, a mission that truly mattered. He was still a hunter, still a predator, but now he was hunting monsters instead of foreign enemies. "Rebecca, what's our evidence package?" Blake asked. Rebecca Santos pulled up financial records and communication intercepts that painted a damning, comprehensive picture of Kellerman's criminal operation. Solid enough for federal prosecution, but you know how these cases go. Rich defendants, expensive lawyers, reasonable doubt arguments. He'd probably plead down to involuntary manslaughter. Blake had learned in 6 months of dispensing private justice that the legal system, in its lumbering complexity, was designed for ordinary criminals, not sophisticated predators like Derek and Kellerman. Men who killed for profit required solutions that courtrooms simply could not provide. "Amanda, what's Patricia Kelwood's psychological profile?" Amanda consulted her tablet, pulling up weeks of discreet observation and background investigation. Highly intelligent, recently widowed after 40 years of marriage, worth approximately $15 million from her husband's technology patents. She's lonely, vulnerable, but not naive. She's starting to harbor doubts about Kellerman, small things. Inconsistencies in his stories, his alleged knowledge of sailing despite claiming to be an expert, his insistence on taking out extra life insurance policies. Her husband was a meticulously detail-oriented man who taught her to notice when things just don't add up. Blake felt the familiar, almost serene calm that always preceded complex operations. Kellerman believed he was hunting an easy target, but he was, in fact, walking directly into a trap designed by someone who understood predators from the inside out. "Here's the operational plan," Blake announced, his voice devoid of inflection. "Tank's team maintains discreet surveillance throughout the weekend. Rebecca monitors all electronic communications. Amanda, you're going to accidentally encounter Patricia at the marina and become her new best friend." "What about Kellerman?" Tank asked, a subtle glint in his eye. Blake smiled, the cold, predatory expression his former teammates would instantly recognize. "I'm going to join their sailing trip as an uninvited guest." Saturday morning dawned with perfect sailing weather off Catalina Island. Clear skies, calm seas, and enough isolation for Kellerman to stage another perfect accident. Blake watched through high-powered binoculars as Kellerman's sleek yacht departed Marina del Rey with Patricia aboard, both of them playing their parts in what Kellerman believed would be his greatest, most diabolical performance. Blake followed in his own vessel, a 30-foot military surplus craft that Tank had meticulously modified with surveillance equipment and tactical capabilities that would make the Coast Guard green with envy. 20 miles from shore, Blake activated his approach plan. "Kellerman's yacht, this is the vessel Phantom requesting assistance," Blake broadcast on the emergency frequency, his voice convincingly distressed. "I'm experiencing engine failure and need urgent help." Through his scope, Blake watched Kellerman's reaction. The man's face contorted with irritation rather than genuine concern. He wanted no witnesses to his meticulously planned murder. But Patricia, a woman of unexpected compassion, was insisting they help the distressed vessel, and Kellerman, trapped by his own facade, couldn't refuse without revealing his true, monstrous nature. Blake deftly maneuvered his boat alongside Kellerman's yacht and climbed aboard with the easy confidence of a man utterly at home on the water. He was dressed as a casual recreational sailor. Relaxed clothes, a friendly, disarming demeanor, no obvious weapons. Richard Kellerman, Blake said, extending his hand, his grip firm. I appreciate the help. Kellerman's handshake was robust, but his eyes were already calculating, frantically working through the unexpected complications Blake's presence had created. No problem at all. What seems to be the issue with your engine? Oh, there's no engine problem, Blake replied conversationally, his voice dropping to a chillingly quiet register. I just wanted to meet the man who's planning to murder Patricia this afternoon. The atmosphere shifted instantaneously, thick with a sudden, suffocating dread. Patricia gasped, stumbling backward, her hand instinctively moving to the emergency radio. Kellerman's face cycled through a series of rapid transformations, shock, then a fleeting flicker of denial, then chilling calculation, and finally the cold, vacant mask of a predator who had been irrevocably exposed. I don't know what you're talking about, Kellerman said, his voice carefully controlled. I think you should leave. Blake pulled out his phone and played a recording of Kellerman's earlier conversation with his alibi witness. Make sure you mention that Patricia seemed depressed lately, talking about joining her husband. The recording continued. The Coast Guard will find her body in 3 days, and everyone will understand it was suicide. Patricia's face went stark, white as the horrifying implications slammed into her. Richard, what is this? What's he talking about? Blake handed Patricia a folder containing photographs, financial records, and meticulously detailed profiles of Kellerman's previous victims. Your boyfriend has killed at least 4 women in the past decade, all of them wealthy widows like yourself. Today's sailing trip was meant to be your last? Kellerman lunged for the boat's emergency locker where he'd hidden a spear gun, but Blake had anticipated the desperate move. A single brutal strike to Kellerman's solar plexus dropped him to the deck, gasping for air, writhing in silent agony. Patricia, Blake said calmly, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of terror. Please use the radio to contact the Coast Guard. Tell them you have a medical emergency and need immediate assistance. As Patricia made the frantic radio call, Blake swiftly zip-tied Kellerman's hands and began the same chilling interrogation process he'd used with Derek Walsh. The results were even more damning. Kellerman had murdered 7 women over 15 years, accumulating over $20 million in stolen assets. You can't do this, Kellerman gasped, his voice raw. This is kidnapping, assault. False imprisonment! Blake smiled, the expression that had terrified enemies in Iraq now fixed upon Kellerman. Actually, this is justice. The legal system failed your previous victims, but it will not fail Patricia. The Coast Guard arrived 30 minutes later to find Kellerman, broken and utterly defeated, confessing to multiple murders, while Patricia, emboldened by her survival, provided testimony that would ensure his ironclad conviction. Blake's evidence package, delivered through anonymous channels, provided federal prosecutors with an airtight case that would result in life sentences without possibility of parole. Monday morning, Blake returned to Denver and the Cross Foundation headquarters, where Amanda was already meticulously reviewing their next case file. Kellerman's been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder, she reported, her voice grimly satisfied. Patricia's testimony was the key that unlocked everything. She's also agreed to fund our next operation. Blake reviewed the new case file. Another predator, another chilling pattern of wealthy women dying in convenient accidents. The war against predators would never truly end, but Blake had, at last, found his rightful place within it. Tyler arrived for their weekly consultation, his face bearing the subtle, serene satisfaction of a man who had finally found peace with his trauma. How does it feel to save lives instead of taking them? Blake considered the question with the solemnity of a man wrestling with a profound revelation. For 6 months, he had been wielding his lethal skills not to eliminate enemy combatants, but to protect the innocent. The work was different fundamentally, yet the satisfaction was deeper, more profound. Like I finally found what I was truly meant to do, Blake replied, his gaze drifting outside the conference room windows. Denver stretched toward the majestic Rocky Mountains, where Derek Walsh had met his violent end 6 months ago. Blake Morrison had been many things in his tumultuous life: a soldier, a husband, a man betrayed, a vengeful phantom. Now he was something entirely new, a guardian who stood between predators and their prey. The Phantom had finally found his ultimate mission, and Blake Morrison had at last come home from the war. Ladies and gentlemen, since you've listened to the end of this story, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which state you're watching from. Let's see what percentage of elite viewers make it to the end. And please kindly turn your attention to the screen after this message. There you'll find a full playlist of thrilling stories, a subscribe button for the channel, and our most captivating story. Click, enjoy, and thank you.